The 60s had The Great Escape and The Longest Day. Everybody knows those, but there were other war movies that decade that nobody remembers, and some of them were actually great. This is a World War II epic about the 1943 battle around the Neretva River in Yugoslavia. Axis forces are closing in on partisan units, and the partisans have to evacuate across this river while fighting off Germans, Italians, and their allies. It's massive in scale with thousands of soldiers and huge battle sequences. Marshal Tito bankrolled this as propaganda, and he wanted it to play internationally, so they brought in Yul Brynner, Orson Welles, Franco Nero to star alongside Yugoslav actors. The budget hit $12 million, which made it the most expensive film ever produced in a communist country. They had 10,000 real Yugoslav soldiers working as extras. They built entire villages and then blew them up for single scenes. And they weren't using miniatures or models. They took actual World War II bridges and trains and just destroyed them for the cameras. During one bridge collapse scene, a stuntman almost died. Several others got injured. When it was finished, they had this massive epic. But then it got to America and somebody decided to cut a full hour out of it. The US version was 102 minutes long and it was completely butchered. People said it looked like someone had edited it with an axe. Dialogue would cut off mid-sentence. You couldn't follow what was happening. It played like a trailer for a better movie. There was a longer version that actually worked as a film, but most people never saw it. American critics dismissed the short version as a mess. But in Eastern Europe, it became this cultural landmark. And years later, people started realizing Spielberg probably watched this thing before he made Saving Private Ryan. The scale of the action, the way they filmed it, it was way ahead of what Hollywood was doing, but most people only saw the butchered version and wrote it off. Paris, 1944. The Allies are about to retake the city from the Germans. A Nazi colonel is trying to sneak out trainloads of stolen French art. The French resistance finds out and gets a railway inspector to stop him. Burt Lancaster, who's the lead here, was 50 years old and had a massive ego. He got hired to make a movie about outsmarting Nazis, and the original director was Arthur Penn, who wanted to make it a slow psychological thriller. But Lancaster hated that idea. After a few days of shooting, he personally fired Penn and brought in John Frankenheimer to turn it into an action movie instead. Frankenheimer gave him what he wanted, but it almost killed people. They needed a train derailment scene, and instead of using miniatures, they crashed an actual train. People got injured, and Frankenheimer admitted later it was a miracle nobody died. Lancaster insisted on doing his own stunts even though he was 50. He hurt his knee so badly during filming that production had to shut down for 2 weeks. The movie cost $6.7 million to make, and it barely broke even at the box office. Lancaster and Frankenheimer had become obsessed with making this thing and nearly killed themselves for a movie that didn't even make money, but it's an incredible film if you can find it. After The Great Escape was a hit, somebody decided to make another escape movie, this time with Frank Sinatra. He plays an American pilot shot down in Italy in 1943 who gets taken to an Italian camp. The prisoners are mostly British, and when Sinatra shows up, he becomes the ranking officer and leads a breakout. The film's based on a novel by David Westheimer, who was actually a navigator on a B-24 that got shot down over Italy during the war. He spent time as a prisoner and used his experiences for the book. Sinatra read the novel and tried to buy the film rights, but 20th Century Fox beat him. So Sinatra went to Fox and offered himself for the lead role even though he was pushing 50. Somehow they actually agreed, and that bet paid off. The movie was a huge hit. Fox made over $1 million in profit, and Sinatra made a fortune off his percentage deal. It's easily the best Sinatra movie from the 60s after The Manchurian Candidate, but nobody talks about it anymore. In 1960, the wreck of the Bismarck still hadn't been found. People were obsessed with the story of how the Royal Navy hunted down and destroyed Nazis' most powerful battleship back in 1941. Director Louis Gilbert got cooperation from the Royal Navy to make a dramatization of the hunt. They used actual wartime ships like HMS Vanguard and HMS Belfast for scenes. For the battle sequences, they built highly detailed miniatures and filmed them at Pinewood Studios, which had one of the largest water tanks in Europe at the time. The Bismarck sinks the HMS Hood early on, which was a massive blow to British morale. Then it becomes this desperate chase, ships running low on fuel, the Bismarck trying to reach safe harbor in France. Eventually, the King George V and Rodney catch up to it and sink it. The film was pretty accurate. Historians praised it for using real time codes and naval procedures, even though they compressed events and combined some real figures for drama. Despite that, it was a surprise hit in America. Made over $6.5 million on a modest budget. In Britain, it became required viewing in schools during the 60s and 70s. Rod Taylor plays a mercenary in the Congo crisis of the 1960s, which was a relatively rare subject for a movie back then. He's hired by the Congolese government to take a train deep into the jungle to rescue European civilians and grab $50 million worth of diamonds before rebels overrun the area. The mission goes bad in every way. They're fighting brutal combat, watching massacres, and the mercenaries themselves start doing horrific things. There's an unhinged ex-Nazi in their group making everything worse. The director was Jack Cardiff, who was better known as a cinematographer, and he pushed the violence further than people had seen. The film graphically shows atrocities like torture and massacres. When it came out, critics were genuinely shocked. Even Martin Scorsese said it was the most violent film he'd seen up to that point, although he also said it should be seen. This one is a British movie about bomber pilots training for a suicide mission. They have to fly into a Norwegian fjord and blow up a cliff so it collapses on a weapons factory. The plot's made up, but it was based on real operations the Allies ran. The Royal Air Force let them use actual Mosquito bombers for filming. Real planes, real pilots flying at insane altitudes through mountains. There's this sequence where they're dodging cliff walls in a narrow canyon, and it's not models or tricks. They actually flew those planes through there. The movie came out, did fine, nothing special. The stuff on the ground between the flying scenes was pretty forgettable, standard romance subplot and noble sacrifice. But those flying scenes stuck with people. 10 years later, George Lucas is making Star Wars. He needs to figure out how to shoot the Death Star trench run. He goes back and watches 633 Squadron, and that's where he gets it. The narrow corridor, the obstacles, the tight claustrophobic feeling. He said it directly. That sequence came from this forgotten British bomber movie. In 1962, director Samuel Fuller made a movie about an American unit that fought in Burma during World War II. He was a veteran himself, and he wanted to show something most war movies at the time weren't showing: what happens when soldiers are just completely worn out. The movie follows a group of soldiers marching through jungle for months. They're dealing with disease, hunger, exhaustion, and when they win battles, half of them collapse from fatigue. Fuller shot it in the Philippines with not much money. He put in these details that made it feel real, like guys eating leeches because they need protein, using weapons to blast through jungle when they can't walk anymore. The lead actor died right after they finished filming. They'd planned more scenes but never got to shoot them. Fuller edited what he had and released it. Nobody really paid attention. It came out and disappeared under bigger war movies with actual budgets. But it was one of the first films to show war as this grinding thing that destroys you slowly, not just in big dramatic battle scenes. In 1969, Sidney Pollack was 26 years old, and he made this completely weird movie about American soldiers hiding in a Belgian castle during the Battle of the Bulge. Burt Lancaster plays a one-eyed major who's obsessed with protecting art while his men are having breakdowns and affairs with local women. The tone shifts all over the place. Sometimes it's anti-war satire, sometimes it's surreal and dreamlike. The U.S. Army wouldn't help with the production because of the anti-war stuff, so Pollack borrowed tanks from the Yugoslav military and painted fake Nazi symbols on them. Word got around Belgrade that they were making fascist propaganda. The rumors got so bad that Tito had to publicly say, "No, it's just a movie. Calm down." The film came out and bombed hard. Critics didn't know what to make of it. Variety said it's a movie that hates war but also doesn't seem to like people. Pauline Kael was actually one of the few who defended it, calling it not great but unforgettable. This one is about the French resistance during the Nazi occupation. It shows the resistance as people doing dirty work to survive, with all the moral compromises that came with it. It plays out almost like a mob movie. It came out at the worst possible time. May 1968 had just seen massive upheavals in France against Charles de Gaulle, and Army of Shadows was immediately labeled pro-de Gaulle propaganda, even though he's barely in it. That perception killed the film, and because France basically controlled what was cool in art house cinema at the time, American distributors followed along without even watching it. The film never came out in America. For almost 40 years, it just didn't exist here. In 2006, someone finally restored it and released it in the US. Critics watched it and completely reversed course. Roger Ebert called it a masterpiece. It topped best of lists even though it was decades old. It's got a 97% on Rotten Tomatoes now. After 633 Squadron made money internationally, a producer figured he could crank out cheap British war films with American leads. This was the first one. Lloyd Bridges plays an officer leading a commando raid on a Nazi-controlled dock, and it's based on a real operation where over 100 men died out of the 622 who participated. The director wasn't particularly talented, but he had this ability to make low-budget material move fast enough that you didn't notice all the cliches. Critics at the time said it was pretty familiar but still pretty good. It came out, made no impression, and got buried under everything else that year.